Today we celebrate the octave of Easter. An octave is an 8-day period. And during this octave of Easter, every day for these past 8 days, we've been celebrating liturgically as if it were Easter Sunday every day. So the second Sunday of Easter then ends the actual octave of Easter. But since the year 2000, at the dictates of Pope St. John Paul the Great, this Sunday has also been known as Divine Mercy Sunday, which leads to a rather, I think, important question, and what's really at the heart of the rest of my homily today. And that is, what is God's mercy? What is your definition of mercy? Is it merely or just, if you can say merely or just when it comes to this, the forgiveness of sins? Or is it a more encompassing idea that takes into account every aspect of God's love and kindness towards his creatures? Well, Pope Francis, I think, tells us what he thinks in his papal bull, in which he declared this sabbatical year of mercy, holy year of mercy, a jubilee year of mercy, however you want to put it. He actually quotes from the book of Exodus, chapter 34, verse 6, and he lets us know what he thinks. And 34:6 goes like this: "The Lord Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." So he believes it encompasses far more than just the forgiveness of sins. In fact, there's a Hebrew word that kind of encapsulates this whole idea of God's mercy, and it's 3 simple letters: HSD. And as I'm sure you know, in biblical Hebrew, there are no vowels. So when you put the vowel points in, it becomes the word hesed, which is my favorite Hebrew word in the entire Hebrew language. Now, during the Caesar of Easter, we celebrate the very essence or the core belief of our faith, and that is that Jesus lives. The Jesus who suffered and died on the cross rose from the dead. We call it the resurrection. It's the foundation of our faith. We believe it. We know that it's a truthful saying to say that Jesus lives and that Jesus rose from the dead. But we also know that many people don't believe that. Not just many people today, that you can tell by watching TV or listening to the radio or seeing cable news shows, but even people at Jesus' time denied that basic truth. And Paul says if that is not the case, if Jesus did not rise from the dead, then vain is your faith, and you're still in your sins. Because you see, it's that Easter rising from the dead that gives meaning to what happened on Good Friday. If Jesus does not rise from the dead, then Jesus is just another example of a good Jewish man who has been tyrannized by the Roman occupation forces. His death is meaningless in the big picture. But we know and we believe that he did rise from the dead, and we put our faith in it. Now, in today's gospel, one of the apostles is used to kind of be a model for those people who did not believe in the resurrection. And that's our friend Thomas, who's become known to history as Doubting Thomas. Just as an aside, ta'om in Hebrew means Thomas, and that's where we get the word Thomas. But as you notice, when Deacon Mike proclaimed the gospel, they gave his Greek name too, because by the time that John writes his gospel, most people who are reading it can't read or doesn't understand Hebrew. And so he gives the Greek name, Didymus. And so Thomas exemplifies all those people who refuse to believe over the centuries in Jesus' resurrection. In fact, he says, I demand physical evidence of this. And unless I put my hands in the nail marks and into his side, I will not believe. And then Jesus appears, doesn't he? And there's no record in the text that says he actually did that. He just falls to his knees and believes and says, my Lord and my God. And we're told that we who have not seen and yet believe are blessed. The Jesus who was born in that stable in Bethlehem and who walked those dirty roads of Palestine as a faith healer and as a preacher, and who died, lives. Jesus lives. The Jesus who died a criminal's death, a horrible, excruciating, shameful death on the cross, he lives. The Jesus who was buried in a tomb he could not have afforded to be laid to rest in, he lives. If that's the case, then what should we think? What should we say? And what should we do? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great German theologian and pastor and martyr, and in fact he was martyred, he was hung by the Nazis just days before the war in Europe came to an end. He suggested that we spend too much time thinking about death and too little time on thinking about overcoming death. He believed that if we do really believe in the resurrection, that this great wind will sweep through the world and change everything. Jesus said, didn't he, that I've made all things new. If only just a few people really believed in the resurrection and really acted on it in their daily lives, a great deal would be changed. How does the fact that the Lord rose from the dead changed your life? You see, if we truly believe that Jesus lives and breathes and moves among us, how might that impact our lives? What we think, what we say, what we do. Might we be kinder, less judgmental, less prejudiced, less fearful? Might we respond more readily to the needs of the poor? Might we be humbler, even freer? Might we be instruments of God's mercy to others? Jesus lives. Vivat Jesu. And so do we. In him, for him, and through him. He who is God's mercy in the flesh.